Welcome to Batchademia,
a podcast so educational it could be a university class.
With your hosts,
Danielle Dick McHugh,
Kim Hannah,
and Bill Henniger.
Welcome to Batchademia. We are here and we are ready to hate on Clayton.
I'm ready to hate on the whole thing.
Oh, the whole thing. I agree.
It
was a rough season. And but we should be pumping ourselves up for the catastrophe that will be next week.
I can't even imagine what it's going to. I mean, they keep showing more and more of the disaster every week, and it just gets worse and worse the more we know the two that are in the even talk. I'm verklempt over it.
I am curious. I'm still curious to find out how all of this unravels.
Yeah.
So before we really jump into things, I have a very important question for you, Kim.
Okay, I'm ready.
What would your dream pre-fantasy suite date be? So I want you to say going to a tea cellar.
Oh,
we were just having a conversation.
We were just talking about it. I think I'm gonna add that.
Okay.
Well, so it could be incorporated because I did a day because I don't know how, do they have the full day for the pre-fantasy suites date, or
I think so,
like an afternoon. So I did a day pre-fantasy suite date and an evening pre-fantasy suite date.
Look at you.
I know. See, I cheat even when I'm not doing the questions. So my date would start at the farmer's market, hopefully a big one like the Des Moines or the St. Paul or the Minneapolis or some, I don't know where we would be. We didn't specify where we would be on the fantasy suites date. So it'd start at the farmer's market where we would drink all the tea and coffee and try all the wonderful things and trip over all of the big dogs on leashes, which I don't enjoy, but a lot of people like to bring their dogs to the farmer's market. So there you go. And then we would go to a baseball game and it would be an awesome day. I'm going to tell you right now, it would be 72 degrees and sunny, and we would build our freckles and enjoy everyone around us and have a few drinks and just take in America's pastime. I also did just see that today they all put their big boy pants on and we will have baseball this summer. So that's exciting.
Yay.
And then after the game, we would go on a boat on a lake because you have to. That's the rule. You have to be on a boat on a lake at some point. And then the evening would be dinner and a show.
I like it.
And then we'd be so tired that we wouldn't do anything in the fantasy suites other than nap because he's gonna have himself and two other girls, and I need to make sure that he's been tested.
I love that. All that I knew when I was thinking about my own answer to this question is that I would not want the dune buggy date. No. I mean, I think that I would enjoy the weird spa, hot spring state. I think I'd enjoy something like that. Let's just lounge. I'd need some sort of good food at some point. And I also wouldn't mind a date where we could be together but not have to pay attention to each other for some of it.
Baseball game.
The baseball game. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of I want to be with someone, but I want to read a novel next to you. Okay. I don't want to have to pay attention to you. And I think that'd be a good test for, later. Mm-hmm. But I would just want to stay up all night and talk about all of our dreams for the future.
That's right. And what our boundaries are and what we are and are not okay with. Conversations that maybe should happen before 5 minutes before you're supposed to go in the fantasy suite.
Oh my goodness. Well, what a wreck. So this week started with the Women Tell All, which I think has just turned into Jerry Springer like trash.
It's awful. Like they're all up standing and screaming at each other.
Like some of the pictures looked like someone had like planned a tableau like image. Like it was ridiculous. I really don't have the energy to recap it all. And since we have so much to talk about, I'm not going to. But I will say one of my absolute favorite lines was, "You can go rot in Ohio for all I care." I was like, that's savage.
Well, and I think that a lot of people are like Southern Ohio is pretty economically hit with a lot of the opioid epidemic and the Rust Belt. And I think there are a lot of people really struggling in Ohio. So maybe Shanae should use her power. I even said her name. Maybe the Dementor should use her powers for good and help out the people of Ohio instead of being just a terrible human being.
She doesn't seem real.
Yeah.
At all.
It seems it has to be an act, right? Like nobody is that cruel.
So here's where I feel like a lot of it feels like a performance. And I've always sort of felt this way a little bit about like the villains and the relationship between the folks in the house, because it does seem that oftentimes they get over it, they become part of Bachelor Nation, and then they're just like cool with each other after this. And so I'm interested to sort of see what happens with Shanae. But I will say the one thing I was impressed by is they were letting her have it. And she kind of did receive the criticism like a champ. I mean, she didn't do anything redeeming, like, I don't know, take accountability for any of her actions or apologize. But she like, you know, there was a toughness to her.
I don't think she thinks she did anything wrong. So why would she apologize?
Wowzers, to live in that headspace. So also tons of DM stuff happening. So apparently, like, Shanae made up a rumor about Genevieve and Aaron. But then, am I right in saying that Shanae's been sliding into Aaron's DMs?
That's what I thought.
I had to rewind and watch it a couple of times because I was like, are they still talking about Aaron or is this someone else?
Did Aaron confirm or deny what happened?
I haven't.
Keep talking.
I have check. I have no info on that. I have plenty of other stuff I've been reading about, but I didn't really read about that. Now, there's also the rumor that Clayton's brother slid into Teddi's DMs, and apparently his brothers are denying it, but Clayton's like, oh no, I 1,000% believe Teddi.
Yeah, I mean, she's adorable. I say go for it, brothers. Hopefully you have maybe you can show your personality a little sooner than he did and have fun with Teddi. I just looked at Aaron's Instagram, by the way, and there's nothing since March 1st. So unless he did it in his stories, which I won't take the time to look at right now, but he doesn't confirm nor deny anything in his grid.
He's probably hanging out with his bro buddy. What's his bro brother?
I forgot he had a best friend on Bachelor in Paradise.
Yeah, the dudes.
Aaron and they loved each other. It was beautiful.
I know.
It was so magical. Can't remember.
So I was kind of shocked to learn that Clayton's brother is kind of more of a looker than he is.
I agree.
Go for it, Teddi.
I agree.
So what else did you think was worth repeating from Women Tell All? We need not to forget.
There were multiple women in the same dress in different colors. And then I thought, I do not like her, but I thought that some of the cheap shots about the Dementor as she was walking down to sit in the hot seat about the fitting of her dress was inappropriate. What does our patron saint Michelle Obama say? When they go low, we go high. We don't make fun of other women's bodies, ladies. We support each other.
Yeah, didn't they say something like about like looking like she was wearing a diaper or something? I was like,
yeah, no, thank you. No, thank you.
They didn't. I felt like in general, the women just looked like fame seekers, but we can talk about that more. It was, yeah.
The only one who I thought, and I'm sorry if I'm stepping on what you're about to say, but the only one who had valid things to say, I thought was Marlena.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone else was just like screaming.
It was rough. It's hard. I've never been a huge fan of Women Tell All. These episodes. I know that you like them sometimes, so right?
Well, and I'm new to it, so I've never seen it in a normal fashion, but it is very Jerry Springer, which I definitely sometimes enjoyed watching in my younger years. But what I will say is I appreciated they didn't try any dumb gimmicks from the audience.
Yeah.
The audience was just kind of there, but they weren't in, and probably they didn't have time to have gimmicks because there was so much else going on. But I still think the bloopers are lame. I don't think the bloopers are very good bloopers. How many times do we have to see people be afraid of bugs? That's all they ever show is people being afraid of bugs. Okay.
So you know what cracks me up is, so we have Jesse acting as Chris Harrison. And what gets me is I think that they're just feeding him the exact same lines that Chris Harrison used to have, and he like delivers them very similarly too. And I'm like,
your own personality, dude.
It's so weird. I don't
know.
And
he needed to shut down. Like if Caitlin and Tayshia had been there, I don't think the chippiness and the screaming I don't think they would have let that go, as long as Jesse had no control of the room. Absolutely no control of the room. And maybe the producers didn't want him to have control over the room, but he had no control over the room.
It's something. It's interesting to me because when I think about where The Bachelor started, and I mean, there's definitely been some improvements in as the show has sort of gone on, but it has also there's been kind of a shift, I think, in terms of it doesn't feel like the same sort of like we're the pure like dating show where you're gonna find true love through this. They're gonna have to rebrand if that's what they're going for. So
yeah, I don't think they are looking for love this season.
No. So let's recap the fantasy suites quickly. So Rachel gets the first date and Clayton tells her that he's in love with her. They shack up and then he yells that he loves her as he walks away. Gabby gets the second date. Clayton tells her that he loves her. They shack up and he yells that he loves her as he walks away. So I was reading about his response to people criticizing him for saying the same thing, and he like literally his defense is, well, like I'm one guy and I like got like my vocabulary and this is how I felt with like both of them, so yeah, like I said the same thing.
You have production assistants and directors and wardrobe assistants and makeup artists all available to give you things to say so that you have different words than I am in love with you.
I am one person. I got one vocabulary. I've got one feeling for all the same.
You know, it doesn't say much for the state of Missouri's education system if he can only think of one way of saying love.
Oh my goodness.
Come on. We have to work on our vocabulary, folks.
So poor Suzie is panicking because she's worried that Clayton is shacking up and telling Rachel and Gabby that he loves them, which he is. And so then after the sex wears off, Clayton's like, oh no, I may have gotten myself into a pickle. Realizing that maybe he shouldn't have told two women that he loves them and then had sex with them. So what does he do? He takes Suzie to dinner and proceeds to tell her that he is in love with her. And she's like, okay. But do you love other people? And like, did you just have sex with them too? Because like, if I'm going to get engaged next week, that might be kind of weird and it might be a deal breaker for me. And then he rages out.
Well, and he also said he loved her the most, which is really going to fly next week when the other two find that out. Like, oh, or when they watched it last night or whenever it was on.
I don't know that I think he's with either of them, but if he had been, that would be a real awkward viewing. I mean, it was rough. Yes, it was rough. So I have 3 different concepts to talk about today, and I'm actually going to skip right away to concept 2, and we'll kind of go back because it's about I love you, shacking up, and the ethics of being the bachelor. So let's talk about this fight that goes down between them. Do you think that Clayton has a point? So his argument is, if this was a deal breaker, you should have let me know this beforehand.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So I think that they're both wrong. I think they're both in the wrong. She knows the show. She knows how this works. If this was a deal breaker for her, she should have said something before they got to this point, right?
Oh, yeah.
His reaction was super not appropriate.
That's how I felt, right? So like, I felt like on one hand, her argument, I don't know if I feel comfortable getting engaged to someone who slept with someone else a week within our engagement. I've always thought that about the show.
Yeah, that's a valid thing to not be okay about.
That is a valid boundary that one would want to set for oneself. So I understand and empathize with that. I also understand Clayton's point where like, if you kind of know how the show works, if that was a boundary for you, I kind of needed you to tell me.
Mm-hmm.
But his reaction to this, to her, I mean, it's clear that like what happened is he panicked and he got really desperate. And it was really ugly. And that's not how you talk to someone. I think what's the saddest moment is like when she's like driving away and they're normally, you know, like crying. And she's like, I just thought that like maybe we could be kinder in
we finally saw his personality, and his personality is problematic. Like, it's troublesome. If this is how he reacts, is this how he reacts every time he doesn't get his way? Like, is this the blow up that happens every time he doesn't get what he wants?
I mean, it was clear that he felt really rejected. He felt super vulnerable, and this is his reaction. And it's hard. I mean, I think that when you get in arguments as couples, like a lot of times they aren't these perfect examples of how you should like work through things. And it can be like you say things that you don't mean and you raise your voice when you don't want to. Like, I think it can just happen sometimes. But this was really hard to watch. Now, what about the ethics of telling people that you love them on the show? What do you think? Like, should they, if that's how they're feeling, should they reciprocate and tell them, or should they be like some other people, like I know have been like, I'm not gonna say I love you until there's an like engagement? Like, what do you think?
Well, I think in real life, if you are a week out from your engagement and you're not like getting married in Vegas and being like super spontaneous, if you're a week out and you've been with this person for weeks and you haven't said you love them, I don't think you should be getting engaged in a week. I feel like again, this show is so problematic because it's not how real relationships evolve and work. But I think that him not saying it to anyone, but also telling all the families last week that he's starting to, because am I not right in that he pretty much told every family that he talked with last week that he was starting to fall in love with at least 2 of them. So yeah. He also told family members. I think, and I just think that there are so many conversations that he should have had with them before the fantasy suite set. Like, I mean, they had some time on the plane to Iceland. Maybe pull each one of them aside and just do a quick survey. Hey, here's where we're going to Iceland. This is what happens in Iceland. Just doing a quick survey. What are your thoughts?
I think it's like such an interesting thing because like in the context of the show, and if you've watched the show, which I would assume people on it have, that like because of the time frame of these things, a lot of times people don't say I love you. They'll say things like I'm falling in love with you, or I have really strong feelings for you. So they'll try to find other ways to communicate that. Yeah. And it sort of is sort of reserved. Now there have been a few people who are the leads that say I love you back. But I think that that's why it's so powerful. And then, some people have kind of talked about how it felt sort of manipulative, like, oh, I'm going to take you out to dinner. I'm going to say I love you. So now you're going to sleep with me. Caitlin Bristow has kind of come out and defended Clayton a little.
Okay.
She said, when you are in that position, it's really hard. And she's like, you really do try to just compartmentalize and focus on the relationship that's in front of you. And you want to just be honest and sort of share how you're feeling. And so she was defending his choice to have sex with multiple people. She's like, look, at the purpose of the show is to explore things. And I am sort of interested to see the other 2 women's reaction next week when he lets them know.
Well, and I don't think that it's the, I think it was pretty obvious that Rachel like realized when Gabby came back with the fabulous bedhead and was like, hey guys, what's going on? It was kind of like, oh, he slept with her too. Like, did they, I just don't know. I think that they kind of get what's going to happen, but they really don't understand how it's going to affect them and Suzie had to see it twice, we think, if they filmed in that order. So I'm surprised this kind of thing doesn't happen every season.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think what's interesting is, Gabby on her date with Clayton said, like, I really do want you to explore other women, because then at the end, when you choose me, I like know that you've chose me and you've really considered your other options. And I do think, so that's why I'm somewhat interested to see, like, that's one thing in theory, right? I do think that sounds really nice. Like, I want to believe that I would be cool with that.
Right.
But I do think that it's a little bit different.
I would not.
Right. I think there's a difference between like what you want to imagine you'd be cool with, and like when it's in your face, what you'd actually be okay with. Yeah, I don't know. It's like I will say the I love you thing is a tough one, because I feel like if someone's being vulnerable and is there with, like with you, if that's really how you feel, like reciprocating that does seem like a pretty natural thing. But in the context of this very unnatural show, I feel like it communicates, I'm choosing you. And so I don't know. Tough stuff. You want to talk about mean girls? Nice girls?
Yes.
Face bitches?
Little bitch.
Well, so I like
a little bitch.
I got really intrigued by this part where, was it Hunter maybe, that was talking about how, well, Shanae, if we were nice to you, you would tell us that we were two-faced. But then if we acted this way, then we were bitches, in this sort of like double bind. And I got to thinking about, I was like, oh, I want to go look at Mean Girl scholarship, because research on Mean Girls was kind of it was quite trendy, especially in the early 2000s. And at the time it was sort of like, oh, women are mean too. Boys, like boys have this way of expressing their anger at each other, and like women are mean too. And sometimes that might be even more violent in certain ways, problematic. And what was really interesting though is this scholarship did kind of create almost this moral panic, right? That, oh no, girls are mean, and maybe their meanness, like they might be violent too. And
so who was writing this? Who was surprised by this scholarship? Like, who was doing the research and being like, oh my gosh, because had they never been in middle school or high school?
Well, I think that there was this idea in some ways that like, I think that there's a difference between what people maybe experienced and sort of like ideal notions of like girlhood, right? And I think there was still this idea that girls were kind of sweet and that boys were like aggressive. And they're like, well, women have always been aggressive, just how they communicate that aggression is different. But then like what that created is sort of like this moral panic in some ways, like, oh, what if femininity isn't sort of like what we thought that it would, and there's like kind of this moral panic about women becoming too aggressive. And some of this, of course, was blamed on feminism too, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But then a lot of research also came out that said, statistically, like, because then there was like women are becoming more and more violent, like physically too. And they're like, and getting into crime and, all this other stuff. And people are like, hold your horses. Like, actually, like, there's really not been any change in like,
I was gonna say,
women and crime and things like that. And so what's kind of interesting now is like, I wonder what kind of scholarship is emerging around these issues. I mean, it did result in, I think, some really important work around bullying and creating visibility around bullying and the mental health effects of bullying in schools. So I think that that's really helpful. But what we're sort of seeing now is, so the concept of masculinity, and we like hear the concept of toxic masculinity, is people are kind of looking into femininities and sort of recognizing that there are hierarchies of femininity. So there's different ways of it being feminine that are more embraced than others. But feminists especially are very reluctant in scholarship to use the concept of toxic femininity because it's sort of been co-opted by men's rights groups. So like they're sort of like, oh yeah, well, women are toxic too, right? And they're like, and it's also been kind of fascinating because then you think of like Hillary Clinton and being like called like a nasty woman, and interesting research on how women how sort of like Mean Girls in some ways ended up getting sort of blamed, or feminists were held accountable for that. Oh, they're asserting their agency, they're trying to usurp power, and like that's because
setting boundaries.
Yes, and that this is somehow yeah, so there's been some kind of interesting terminology arising, such as like hostile femininity or pariah femininity is really interesting. And that's where it's kind of almost a rejection of femininity, but still embracing the feminine. So actually the best example of like pariah femininity that I've read is roller derby. So you have, skates on, you might wear fishnet hose, maybe short shorts. You have like your roller derby name that's oftentimes
awesome.
Totally awesome, and challenging notions of femininity. So like there's things like fishnet and short shorts that are like feminine, right? They're very feminist and embracing sexuality, but then at the same time like really strong bodies that are like bumping up against each other and aggressive, and yet like they're also on skates. And so it's kind of this interesting simultaneous like embrace and challenge of femininity. And so I don't know, I think it's interesting. I want to learn more about some of this research that's come out, because I think that it's really interesting. And it's interesting to me how it's playing out in these women tell all, where it's sort of women fighting about sort of, oh, I'm screaming and fighting, but it's about me protecting you from toxic Shanae.
Mm-hmm. So you're being toxic to protect from toxic.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't know.
Wouldn't be like that?
What's that?
You know who wouldn't be like that?
Who?
Kelly Kapowski.
Absolutely. So Kim's got on a pretty red shirt right now. Tell us about.
I thought because we were talking about such like angry and ugly topics of girl on girl crime and girl on girl shouting and boys being problematic, that I would bring Kelly Kapowski to the conversation because she is pure and holy.
Go Kelly Kapowski. Remember when it was like kind of a big deal when, what's the actor's name that played Tiffany
Amber Thiessen? She went on first place and everybody lost their minds.
Yes, that was a moment in time.
And she played a fun character on Melrose Place. Or no, not Melrose Place. Was she on 90210?
It was 90210.
90210.
Yeah.
But she still played a really fun, like anti-Kelly Kapowski. And you could tell she was having a blast playing that character.
Probably. So I want to talk a little bit about our predictions of what happens next week.
Sure.
But before we do that, can you do your wild card?
Sure.
I'm jumping out of order today.
Yeah, that's cool.
I'm living on the edge.
Oh, I wrote notes because I kind of did this at 10 o'clock last night. And so I wanted to, so the wild card is the concept of the walk of shame, because kind of we saw Clayton do 2 walks of shame back to his hotel, and we saw the girls come in after they were done with the messy hair and the, the swollen lips and the afterglow. Gabby especially, she's adorable in the morning, by the way. Gabby. But so I wanted to talk a little bit about the concept of the walk of shame and why it's so sexist. So the walk of Webster's dictionary defines walk of shame as, no, it doesn't. I didn't look it up on Webster's dictionary, but so for those of you who don't know, or maybe English isn't your first language, you're like, walk of shame, I have no idea what you're talking about. Walk of shame, shout out to our international listeners, by the way, that's crazy. The walk of shame is a slang term that usually describes a person, usually a woman, who is making her way home from spending the night at someone else's house for a sexual encounter. And they're like, what you picture is a woman with her hair all messed up, maybe her makeup's a little blurred, she's in last night's super fun club dress, carrying her heels, and like her purse, and walking, which, probably in the bigger cities, I think around here, it's mostly in your car, like walking to your car, if you can find your car, walking to your car and driving home. And the phrase is believed to have begun on college campuses. I couldn't find a year when it started, but I'm guessing maybe if it's not a more recent term, maybe in like the 80s or 90s, when women had a little bit more freedom on college campuses than they did in the before times. But I found a Daily Beast article. So Danielle and Bill go for the scholastic journals and the article, and I read the Daily Beast. So they talk about the iconic image of a woman in the disheveled hair and the clothes, but it's not her appearance that makes her trot home in shame, but that her appearance lets others know she probably had sex, and for that she should be shamed. So it's still this puritanical, like, girls need to, not have sex before marriage, or only, not have fun at night and stay good. And then there's in the article, there's a link that you can order. They talked about a link on a website where you can order a walk of shame kit, so that has all the ingredients to cover up your behavior, with clean clothes and flip-flops so no one suspects, but it's absolutely geared toward women. It's not geared toward men who would be doing walks of shame. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about, like, the concept of the walk of shame. We've seen it in TV and movies. One of my favorite New Girl episodes, if for those of you who are New Girl fans, is called Walk of Shame, and it's Jess and Cece coming home in the morning, and the car gets towed, so they literally have to walk home, and just the shenanigans that happen because they're trying to get home after. And they keep saying it was the blowout because they got, like, their hair done and went out, and then ended up with two gentlemen that they probably wouldn't have otherwise. So, and there's a Walk of Shame movie, which I tried to watch. I tried to do my research. I tried to watch it. I got about 40 minutes. No, I don't even think I made 40 minutes. I think I got a half an hour in and I turned it off. But it stars Elizabeth Banks, who's delightful. And I just couldn't. I'm sorry, Elizabeth Banks. But they don't really talk about, like, Clayton leaves, he shouts at the balcony to both of them, same, shouting up, I love you, and then he leaves, and then the girls have to come back in, and there's just this concept of, why do we have to have a name for coming home after a night with someone? Like, why can't it just, why is there a name? What is happening? So I just rambled really fast for a while. Danielle, what are your thoughts on the walk of shame?
Well, I think that, I do think that it's something that we have termed that is, gendered towards women. That for men, it's a walk of brag, right? Like there is no like there's not
There
shame.
is no shame. There is no shame.
The thing that's really fascinating to me about this horrible new ritual that they're doing on The Bachelor, where they keep the contestants together for this moment, is like, what's interesting about it is the shame isn't necessarily on the person that's coming home. The shame is for the other two that have to like witness that someone else just had fun with their boyfriend. Right. So like it's like a really interesting, and then like they feel like they should feel bad because they made their friends feel bad. And so it's an interesting thing because the shame isn't necessarily for having fun in this situation. The shame is that you're the one that's at home. Yeah. But then like, then the person that had a good time is sheepish because they then feel shameful. Yeah. Not necessarily about what they did the night before, but for making their friends feel bad about what they did before. So it's kind of a complicated, lots of shaming, right?
So they didn't used to do it this way. I thought that so I know it started this way when they were in the COVID seasons. So before the COVID seasons, they weren't all together in the same hotel for the
in fact,
I
would love to go back and watch one of the early seasons because one, I swear that they have upped the number of women that they do family dates, hometowns with. So I think that it used to be only 3 people would go to hometowns, and then by fantasy suites, I swear it used to only be 2 people. Okay. I don't know when. And maybe I just am misremembering, but I feel like it wasn't until more recently that now it's 3 people that you'd even have fantasy suites with. I thought that it narrowed it down to 2 back in the earlier seasons, but people can like send us emails correcting me if I'm wrong. And then they used to have it so like once you got to that point, it was sort of like, oh well, this is getting serious, so we're going to kind of keep them separate. And they like had their own rooms, and it sort of seemed like at that point the contestants didn't really interact with each other. And since COVID, I think that they couldn't have them at different places, and so they were all in that, the same thing. And like this happened, and I think they're like, oh, well, that made for a really awkward and good television. And they've just kept doing it. I don't like it. Which I think is part of what I really do feel like this show as a whole is sort of shifting. It used to kind of be this like, we're the more pure people, are really here looking for love. Look at all these relationships that have lasted, and it doesn't feel quite like that anymore. Yeah. And I mean, I think some of it's beyond their control, right? Like I do think that with digital media and the way in which this is now something that people can gain fame around, it shifts it. Have you read that like apparently the part of Clayton's response to Suzie was that he felt that she was setting herself up for the Bachelorette spot? And a ton of people online, that was not my perception at all. But it was really interesting to me how many people online also perceived that.
Interesting. Okay.
That they saw her as, oh, I'm kind of getting nervous about this stuff, but also if I just kind of bow out now and seem like this like, you know, that I'm a really strong, like I'm in the position of the person that's oftentimes chosen for bachelorette. And I didn't perceive that. And I think that there is this element of distrust between the lead and a lot of the contestants now, because they don't, you know, I think there's always been some of that with these shows, but I think that it's really intensified with the fact that like being an influencer is something that can make you money.
Yeah. Well, they like the Bachelor data Instagram, they talk about Instagram follower increases every week after the episode.
Yes. Bachelor data, by the way, is amazing. You should follow her. She does great work and very informational. But I mean, I think that it like, it's a really interesting between that. And I think some of the choices then that the franchise has made, it feels like sort of a shift.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I'm going to close down this conversation because we want to get to predictions. But all I'm going to say is, if we have to still give a name to something that we shouldn't, because it's no big deal, we should call it a Trek of Power.
Yeah.
Trek of Power.
I love that. Trek of Power.
Trek of Power.
Get it, girlfriends. So I want to know your predictions. I have my own. I mean, I think we can both agree we think it's going to be a wreck.
I don't know how they're going to make 2 nights of, like, why are we making this a 2-night thing? Cut your losses, call it good, be done. Especially if they're both 2-hour episodes. I can't.
I don't have time for that. I was like, I'm going to have to wake up at 5 this morning just to finish watching The Bachelor because there's so much of it.
It's so much. I think that I'm a little interested to see who is the surprise. They've talked about someone shows up, and the funny stuff on Instagram shows pictures of Blake. A surprise.
I love it.
Which I wouldn't be mad about if Blake showed up in this situation. I'd be like, fine, whatever.
I don't watch spoilers. Do you? I don't look at spoilers. You don't, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I honestly don't know. I don't think he'll be engaged at the end of it. I'm going to be really mad if they name him the Bachelor for another season, because I've seen rumors about that, and that will make that.
No.
Like, it wasn't successful. Let's try it again.
No, that would be a plummet for the ratings. I cannot imagine them doing that. So I kind of wonder, because there is like a part of me that's like, why saying that he loves them both and that he's had sex with both of them, why does this cause them to cry so much? And so there's like a part of me that I'm wondering if he tells them that, and then it's like, but I love Suzie the most. And so
that's why they cry. Yeah.
And that's why they're crying. Yeah. I don't think him and Suzie get back together though. Like, I mean, I can't imagine him saying.
Not if he's accusing her of trying to go on be the next Bachelorette.
Yeah, I just can't imagine his response. I don't know. And I don't think that things work out well. You know, it's bad when like your dad's disappointed with you on national TV.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I think it's going to be an interesting night. Couple of nights. And then will they do so is the second night after the rose then maybe?
See, that's the only thing I could figure, but why do you need 2 hours of after the rose? I could see the final episode taking 2 hours. I cannot. And then like a 1 hour
afterwards, like a hour solid Monday night.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a lot. It's
a lot. There's way too much attention being put on this season for how non-exciting it has, like, it's been so focused on so few people the whole time. Like the first half was all the Dementor, and then the second half has just been like lumpy. I don't know.
You know what keeps me coming back? The mystery is not who does he fall in love with? Who does he end up at the end? I keep coming back because I'm like, I want answers to why they chose him as the bachelor. Right. So I think like that is the mystery I'm trying to solve.
And I don't think we're ever going to get it solved. I don't.
And I think that that's also why it's unsatisfying to us as viewers, because I think in a lot of ways, like it is playing out what happens on so many of the seasons. But the reason that it's letting us down this time is because we're like, I want to know answers as to why Clayton was chosen. And he's been like so kind of boring. And it's funny because at the Women Tell All, when they just all let him have it, I was feeling actually pretty empathetic towards him. I was like, oh, this poor guy is just kind of a doofus. He's in over his head. Like, there's nothing necessarily wrong with him. And then he talked to Suzie like that. And I was like, I get it. This is why all these women are talking to you like that, because they know what goes down and they ain't happy.
Yep. Well, and every single person on that show is on that show to get famous. I don't care what they say. They might be there for love, but also to get famous.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, y'all buckle up. One more week. Only 4 short hours left. So, oh my goodness. So before we leave today, I do want to offer a shout out to our listeners, Monk's Corner, South Carolina.
Yay, Monk's Corner.
Yay, Monk's Corner. Thanks for listening. It's apparently a southern, charming little town of about 8,000 people, not too far from Charleston.
Nice.
Have lovely hospitality there, based off of my internet search. So
go. Did you go to their Chamber of Commerce page?
I sure did.
That's awesome.
So thanks for listening, Monk's Corner. And we'll see the rest of you on, or listen to talk to you. I don't know, whatever this thing is.
Okay.
Next week.
Bye. Bye. You have been listening to Bachademia
with your hosts, Danielle Dick McGee,
Kim Hanna,
and Bill Hennig.
All thoughts and opinions expressed on the show are solely those of the person who spoke them.
If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe to the show, leaving a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to your podcast.
Also, please share with your family, friends, colleagues, and other ardent Bachelor fans.
If you have comments or questions you would like us to address on the show, you can email us at bachademia@gmail.com.
Or on the Twitter with the handle @Bachademia.
Thanks for listening.